Good evening. It's the February 23rd Dimas City Council meeting will come to order. The City Council chambers will be closed, will be open for public comments only. Pursuant to the Governor's Executive Order dated March 17, 2020, the City Council is authorized to hold public meetings via teleconference. And to make meetings accessible electronically to all members of the public seeking to observe and address the legislative body. All Brown Act provisions that require the physical presence of the City Council members or public for City Council meetings are waived. Directions for public comment period. There will be 3 options for members of the public to participate during oral communications. There will be 1 oral communication period at the beginning of the meeting for the public to comment on any matter on or off the agenda. Each speaker will have 1 3-minute opportunity to make their comments. At the 2-minute mark, staff will announce 1 minute remains. Public comments will not be taken during each individual agenda item, except that public comments will be taken separately for public hearing items. Public comments will be taken in the following order. Written comments received by email before 4 o'clock will be provided to the council, posted on the website, acknowledged by name and topic, and added to the permanent record. In-person participation. Current orders provide that only 15 people are allowed in the room. Council members, staff, and members of the public will not exceed 15 persons requirement for the City Council chambers. A speaker card will be required to facilitate and track the number of participants in the council chambers. If you do not wish to list your name, you may identify as Speaker 1 or the number in the queue. The cards will be presented to the city clerk, who will call the speakers to the podium in the order that the cards are submitted. Once 3 minutes has expired, speakers will exit the chambers using the double doors to the right of the podium and exit City Hall. Staff will be in the lobby monitoring the number of attendees and ushering the speakers into the chambers when space permits. Phone participation may call 909-394-6206 before the closure of the public comment period. Public comments may also be submitted by logging onto the meeting through Zoom link provided in the agenda. Public hearings will follow the normal protocol. Madam City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Pro Tem Bertone.
Present.
Councilmember Ebner.
Here.
Councilmember Vienna.
Here.
Councilmember Weber.
Here.
Mayor Bedar.
Here.
Record will reflect all council members are in attendance.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Oral communications. Members of the audience are invited to address the City Council on any item on the agenda or not on this agenda. Public comments will not be taken during each individual agenda item except for public hearings. Comments on public hearing items will be heard when that item is scheduled for discussion. Under the provisions of the Brown Act, the legislative body is prohibited from engaging into discussion on any item not appearing on the posted agenda. However, your concerns may be referred to a staff member or set for discussion at a later date. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. This will be the only oral communication periods with the exception of public hearings. Open the public hearing, open the oral communications. John? Okay, we have,
Mayor and council, we did receive 2 email communications for public comment. One was from M. Luna. The other was from Sean Cesares. Those were copied and given and placed on the dais, as well as emailed to the council members and posted on the city's website. They will be added to the official record.
thank you. Okay. Do we have any in-person speakers? I'm seeing there are 2.
Mayor, council, we do. Our first speaker is John Hauser, speaking on tents and vehicles in the front yard.
Sir, would you like to come up to the mic, please?
Good evening, gentlemen. I've been a resident in this city for 45 years, and so I know this topic has come up many times about motorhomes, trailers and boats, earthquake preparedness vehicles. My comments are about the citations giving for having a canopy in the front yard. So I talked to the person that came out and said one of the main reasons is aesthetics and safety. And so she said they could blow over in a wind. So I said, well, I've bolded it down. So I tried to explain that I have a classic car that is longer than the garages were built in 1959 when I got it, or whatever it is. So I put a canopy tent over my car, which I was cited for. Now, I've had that tent there kept up, new when it rips, for 4 years. But there was a house for sale at the end of the block, and the realtor lodged a complaint. I understand that they want to make sure that things are kept nice in the neighborhood. So I have checked with all the neighbors, but I know that's not an issue. So I inquired about how the idea of having a canopy over the car might be considered illegal. And they said that you look at what surrounding cities are doing. And I've gone to the surrounding cities of Covina, West Covina, and Laverne, and see motorhomes, boats, everything in front yards. Now, I ended up selling my motorhome. I have a boat that I have to pay a storage every month for. I feel like I'm in an HOA. And I explained that the reason why a car cover isn't sufficient for a classic car is that it gets mildew and wet underneath of these covers, that having the canopy lifted up over my car makes it safe on the protection of that vehicle and the paint. I have done everything I can to make sure it's secured to the ground. It's in a corner at the end of a cul-de-sac, and every neighbor has been okay with it. It seems that putting a cover over just to protect that car is far less intrusive than having car parts on people's driveways as they're rebuilding cars. And I would just like you to take a look at your policy again on having a tent, as long as maintained and in a corner, and it's done in a safe manner. Again, it'd be in the garage, but it just won't fit. I think I made my 3-minute time, and so I appreciate you taking a look at that policy again. I know they've come up several times over the years about what you can have in your driveway. Thank you.
No, thank you, sir.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Do we have his contact information?
He has a card.
It's on the card. Sir, could you leave your contact information with a member of staff so we could get it later?
Behind the screen here.
Thank you.
Well, if he puts it on there.
Sure.
that-
Do that. I'll be in touch.
Okay, and let me just put this here. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mayor, our next speaker is Cynthia Williams on behalf of the San Dimas Chamber.
Okay, Ms. Williams?
I don't have my heels on. Good evening, City Council, staff, and members of the community. My name is Cynthia Williams, and I'm here as an ambassador for the San Dimas Chamber, and I own Old Town Antiques in downtown. We want everyone to know that the Chamber has been actively supporting our San Dimas businesses during the last year. Our events have been online and Zoom. The Chamber has been posting information for business to take advantage of all of the programs available during COVID-19, along with the updates on the latest information. We at the Chamber are looking forward to being able to host events in person as soon as it's safe. Being a member of the Chamber is a definite asset to all of our businesses. We urge any business not already a member to contact us and hear about the great ways that being a Chamber member can help your business. We wanted to let the community and the council know about one of our upcoming virtual events, Community Connections, taking place on Thursday, March 4th at 11 a.m. The San Dimas and Laverne Chambers, in partnership with the Bonita Unified School District, have collaborated to give the community an update on the state of the Bonita Unified School District from Superintendent Carl Coles and a review of the Career Technical Education, CTE, programs from Bonita Unified instructors. The event is free and open to the public and businesses. To RSVP, please visit the San Dimas Chamber calendar section for this virtual event and many other community events. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Okay, no more, okay. Are there any phone call-ins? All right, John?
Thank you for calling. Please state your name for the record, and your 3 minutes starts now.
Hi, this is Pete Lewis. I get some feedback here. Thank you, Mayor and City Council, for taking my call. I'm Pete Lewis from San Dimas. First off, I'd like to welcome Captain Ash to his new post. Welcome. I'd also like to mention a shooting that took place a few weeks ago on the goal line where the operator received 2 gunshot wounds and was chased through the car. While Metrolink has cameras facing both outwards and inwards on the locomotive, none are on the passenger cars. More relevantly, the light rail system doesn't have any cameras at all, so the only video came from the station itself. When light rail reaches San Dimas, we will be having the only line, or the line with the highest crime rate in Metro, so I thought it wouldn't be too soon to start thinking about security measures. Besides video cameras at the station, I would suggest we install a high-profile kiosk with a hotline directly to our sheriff station. Having a sheriff station so close to a light rail station is an advantage, and we should maximize its exposure and effectiveness. This could prove to be a great deterrent. Another thing that is real apparent is that when ridership is down, crime goes up. Fewer people around emboldens criminals. Metro has realized this, and that is also a problem with the rising number of unhoused and criminal riders. To address this, they are proposing adding $110 million to the transit policing. Personally, I would like to see the light rail get the same video system installed on Metro buses, but that is a comment that's needed to be made to a different group. And that brings me to another comment I would like to make. I have stopped listening to City Council meetings live because of the length and the amount of material I consider skip-worthy. On the last meeting, I heard that public comments weren't the problem, and that based on stopwatch, only a little over an hour was public comments. This is not an accurate way of measuring content, as the council is often responding to the public comments, and that time should be included in any public comment stopwatch timing. Secondly, a lot of recent public comments have just been attacks about national politics, repetitive in nature, or just ramblings. This disadvantages the City Council, the San Dimas residents, and our city employees have to sit through all this, even if it is only an hour. When I speak in downtown LA, I am often limited to 1-minute statements and have to wait for many hours of discussion before I speak. I don't want our city to get to that point. And while I encourage public comments, I also want to discourage wasting everyone's time by just talking to talk. Finally, I would like to suggest we consider utilizing the citrus labels painted at the city yard for our artwork at the light rail station. I'm not sure how they could be transfers, and they may not be perfect reproductions, but they're from actual students over several years, are very colorful, and tied to our city's history. I think that those are things that we should be proud of and deserve more exposure, so I hope you will consider. Thank you. Thanks again for listening. Bye.
Thank you, sir. Next.
Thank you for calling. Please state your name for the record, and your 3 minutes starts now.
Good evening, City Council and members of the AMP. I am calling in for support of the Council's opposition to Bill 9. This bill, like many attempts beforehand, is a way to strip local control, force a state mandate on us, and further exacerbate the affordable housing crisis. It requires no infrastructure improvements. The existing sewer, power, water, and gas infrastructure cannot handle new demands. The state pushes the financial burden of required infrastructure improvements not on itself or developers, but on local jurisdictions. It triggers life safety issues with only 4-foot side and rear setbacks, as opposed to the current 5-foot side and 15-foot rear setbacks. SB 9's impact on light, air, and privacy for residents will be huge. It poses huge fire risks by densifying lot areas and shrinks the space between homes. Fires sweeping down canyons or down a neighborhood block will now endanger many more households, impacting exiting routes and firefighters' ability to reach these fires. For those who like open space, no more. Not with this bill. This further expands building footprints and will drastically reduce the size of backyards and necessitates the loss of trees. There are numerous options for adding housing without ruining existing neighborhoods. SB 9 is based on a flawed economic premise, and I'm glad the council is coming out in opposition to this bill. I urge the council for the next meeting to direct staff to write opposition to Senate Bill 10. This was introduced by Senator Scott Wiener and is a planning and zoning housing development density bill. I've emailed the council these housing zoning bills and urged the community to take a look at the following. SB 6, local planning, housing, commercial zones. This is Caballero, Eggman, and Rubio's bill. SB 12, local government planning and zoning, wildfires. This is McGuire's bill. SB 15, housing development incentives, zoning of idle retail sites. This is Portantino's bill. AB 115, planning and zoning, commercial zoning, housing development. This is Bloom's bill. AB 387, Social Housing Act of 2021. This is Lee's bill. And finally, AB 491, housing affordable and market rate units. This is Lorena Gonzalez's bill. Before my time expires, I would like to express gratitude to everyone on the City Council and the staff for taking the time and patience to look into these bills. There have been a ton that were introduced, and it takes those who are determined to nudge the council and inform everyone about legislation like this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next.
Thank you for calling. Please state your name for the record, and your 3 minutes starts now.
My name is Terry Dipple. I appreciate the City Council taking a position on agenda item SB 9, and I just want to say thank you and appreciate your leadership.
Thank you. Next.
Thank you for calling. Please state your name for the record, and your 3 minutes starts now.
Good evening, City Council and the Mayor. My name is Jean Olander, and I'm calling with regard to the item C on the other business, dealing with the comment process for the structure of the meetings. I think at this point we've only really had one meeting where it was changed, and I think it's way too early to evaluate how that process is working. It needs many more meetings, I would say at least 4 months, maybe longer, to truly evaluate how well the process is working. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the rest of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. John?
Mayor, at this time, we have no callers, but allow us a 2-minute wait for any other callers that wish to make the call in, since we have a broadcast delay.
Okay, 2 minutes.
We have a No, it's shorter, but 2 minutes. Make sure that you have the time, you hear the lag, you have time to respond. About 30 seconds, I think.
Okay, seeing that we have no more phone-in speakers, I'll ask if we have any Zoom speakers. Showing that we have one.
We are now taking oral communications for those who are joining us through Zoom. If you wish to take part in oral communications and are joining us by internet device, please locate the Zoom hand raise feature and click the hand icon. For those who have dialed into Zoom, press *9 on your phone now to raise the hand feature in Zoom. You will be identified by your screen name for internet device and the last 4 digits of caller ID for dialed-in participants. Participants will be called upon one at a time in the order the hand was raised. When called upon, please unmute. To unmute from an internet device, click the microphone button at the bottom. From a phone, press *6. Participant Isabel Ebner, please unmute. It is your turn to speak. State your name for the record, and your 3 minutes starts now.
Good evening, Mayor Badar, City Council members, City staff. This is Isabel Ebner. I live on West 4th Street in San Dimas. First, I just wanted to say a quick thanks to Ms. Williams for her announcement about the Chamber of Commerce event with the superintendent. I did see that event posted online, and I'm looking forward to attending that. I'd like to make a public comment about agenda item 4C. As someone who frequently watches and participates in council meetings and other city meetings like Traffic Safety Planning Commission, I just wanted to encourage the council again to consider moving to an all Zoom format. Not only is this one of the safest options during the COVID-19 pandemic, but it's how the city's other commissions conduct business. And for me, it's been very effective. It's easy to hear, see, participate. That said, I understand there are varying opinions, and if the council decides not to go completely to Zoom, I just want to extend my gratitude and say thank you for offering Zoom as an option for members of the public to participate, because it is easy for me to participate this way, and I appreciate that you can see my face, and even though I can't be there in person, maybe it seems like I'm standing at the podium. I would like to request that the council revisit the public comment process. As Mrs. Bremer pointed out in the last meeting, the claim that the public is responsible for dragging out council meetings is misleading, and I don't think that eliminating public comment is public comment throughout the meeting is the best strategy for streamlining the meetings. City council meetings are supposed to be one of the times and places for the public to participate in our local government and engage with our elected officials. We shouldn't be trying to suppress involvement, but encourage it. So in the spirit of transparency, civic engagement, and participation, I would encourage the council to allow public comment on each agenda item, as was previously the case. This would allow members of the community to save their comments and questions for specific items when those items are actually being addressed. Sometimes staff reports or council members' questions actually provide more clarification or lead to new questions for members of the public who are watching. So allowing public comment during those discussions or right after, to me, makes more sense. As opposed to having people make comments at the beginning on items that they really don't know that much about. I don't think the council wants to appear to be limiting anyone's speech and limiting civic engagement. So I just respectfully request the council to consider restoring the public comment process as it was previously. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else? Do we need a 2-minute pause or? No, we're okay. All right. Seeing we have no additional Zoom participants, we'll move on with the consent calendar. All items on the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be enacted by a motion unless a member of the City Council requests a separate discussion.
So moved.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to just ask for, there's a nice staff report on item 3B, which was the SB9 matter. And we're going to do a letter of opposition if the consent calendar passes. But just for everybody's benefit, I think it would be great if staff could give the report or a synopsis of what they were saying in that report supporting a letter of opposition.
3B?
Is it 3B or 3? Yeah, 3B. I think that's on the SB9.
Increased density in single families?
Right.
Okay, I believe that staff recommends the City Council submit a letter in opposition to SB 9. Okay, do you understand what John's asking for now?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I think what Councilmember Ebner is asking for is just a little short recap of what the legislation actually is and the position the city is taking. And so online we have our planning manager, Fabiola Zaleya Milikar, who wrote the letter on behalf of the council, and I'd like to ask her to give a very brief summary of what the legislation is and what position we're taking.
Okay, we have a first and a second for the consent calendar, but we'll go ahead and read that, and then if John accepts that, then we'll consider it with the entire consent calendar. All right, John?
Yes, definitely.
Go ahead there, Fabiola.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
We hear you fine.
Great. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members, staff, and members of the public. So on Senate Bill 9, what it does is basically brings back Senate Bill 1120, which was introduced in the legislation last year. And basically what it proposes is to subdivide a single parcel into 2 parcels of equal size with a minimum lot size of each parcel created of 1,200 square feet. And what it will do is, currently by law, each parcel can have an accessory dwelling unit plus a junior accessory dwelling unit. So which creates kind of 3 households to live in one parcel. So with a Senate Bill 9, what it will do is basically double that amount. It also allows that in order to create the subdivision, the existing structure can be demolished up to, or could be modified up to 25% in order to make room for the additional parcel. If it's a historic home, it could be preserved. So the city still has the right to preserve a historic resource if it's been identified, only if it's on the survey list. So additionally, what it does as well is limits the number of parking spaces that can be required per unit. It could require up to one parking space on site per unit for the primary dwelling unit. But if the parcel is located within half a mile of a transit corridor, or, like light rail or a major bus stop, then no parking is required. What it also does is when somebody uses Senate Bill 9, if passed, and they subdivide the lot, the life of that parcel map can be extended up to 8 years. Typically, the way it works when somebody comes and gets a parcel approved, a tentative parcel approved, they got 24 months to get a final, or they can get an extension of up to a year at a time. So in this case, it could be the life of that parcel map could be up to 8 years. And pretty much that's one of the things about this Senate bill. Additionally, we could only require those objective standards related to design for the structure and related to the subdivision map act that are adopted by the city. So we cannot add any additional requirements unless those requirements were known to the applicant prior to submitting their subdivision to the city for review. And what it will do is basically what the state is trying to do is encourage the production of housing, of new housing, and intensify the uses within the residential neighborhoods. And that's the intent of the state to address the crisis, the housing crisis that exists right now. And as you saw in your packet, the staff prepare a letter of opposition to Senate Bill SB 9, just like we did with Senate Bill 1120 last year. That concludes my presentation, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Fabiola. Any questions?
Well, thanks, Fabiola. I don't really have a question, but I did want to comment. This is what I brought up at our last meeting. I appreciate staff being so quick in getting this letter of opposition on the agenda for us to approve tonight. This bill is really, as Fabiola said, it was attempted last year, and there was just a procedural problem with it not getting into the hopper or onto the governor's desk in time before the session ended. But this is really bad. Terry Dipple, who spoke before, you might know, used to be mayor of San Dimas, and now he's the executive director of a COG up in along the coast. And there is a group trying to oppose this, but I just wanted to give one example of what this would mean for us. And you can pick any parcel in the city, and as long as it hasn't been subdivided using this method already, it can be subdivided in the manner that Fabiola was talking about. So there's an interesting lot, 3 lots you might want to drive by. It's on 4th and San Dimas Avenue. Those 3 lots used to be one lot, probably maybe 8,000 square feet or whatever it was. So now they're each a third of that. So each of those are individual lots. It's right there at the signal in case you need some orientation. And each one of those could be divided again. So now you have 6 lots, and each one of those could have 3 units on it. So on that little piece of land there, you could have 18 units. And I'm picking an example in Old Town, but the same goes for any place in the city, unless your lot is already less than about 4,000 feet, which there aren't that many, or no, less than 2,400 square feet. And I don't know if we have any lots that are less than 2,400 square feet. So the it's really almost a stated goal to eliminate single family zoning throughout the state. And so I'm really glad that we are going on record as opposing this, and individual council members should probably step up and call their representatives to tell them how much we don't like that, especially those that came from local government. I mean, Anthony Portantino should be asked to oppose this as well. But thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Fabiola. Any additional questions of Fabiola? Thank you. Okay, we have, for the consent calendar, we have a motion and a second. I will read the resolution 2021-10, a resolution of the City Council of the City of San Dimas, California, establishing a permit parking policy and fee for issuance of parking permits pursuant to the Chapter 10.25 of the San Dimas Municipal Code. We have a motion to waive further reading.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All in favor for the resolution?
Aye.
All right. We need a roll call.
vote.
Mayor Pro Tem Bertone,
Yes.
Councilmember Ebner,
Yes.
Councilmember Vienna,
Yes.
Councilmember Weber,
Yes.
Mayor Bedar.
Yes.
Vote that carries by a 5-0 vote.
Okay. We'll move on to other business. 4A, initiation of a municipal code text amendment to amend Chapter 18.140 CG Creative Growth Zone and to allow for formerly established second-floor residential units in the CG2 Frontier Village area to be reestablished as a conditional use. Staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, we need to clarify that the properties that we're talking about were properties that had a residential use on the second story prior to 1940, which is 4 parcels in the downtown. I think at this time, I believe you should request if there are any council members that need to recuse themselves, and then we can go proceed with the staff report.
So does anyone need to recuse themselves?
I do need to recuse myself because I am, my house on Railway is within 500 feet of one of the parcels. And I believe John was going to provide me an exit here with an exit room. If not, I'll just log off and join back in when you're done.
John, were you able to give him an exit room? I just did. Okay.
So,
City Manager, report, please.
So, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to introduce Mr. Ken Fichtelman, our Assistant Planner, who will give the staff report.
Thank you, Ken.
Mayor and council members, we're here tonight to possibly initiate a municipal code text amendment in the Creative Growth Zone Area 2. Next slide. So background on the Creative Growth Zone, it was created in 1979. It was actually the city's first specific plan. And it was developed to provide amenities, encourage economical and appropriate use of the land, and utilize innovative characteristics in the design and use of buildings. It was basically put into place to kind of try to make the downtown area stand out and allow uses and forms that might not be allowed elsewhere in the city or that we wanted to prioritize in that area. Area 2 of the Creative Growth Zone is Frontier Village. That would be your downtown corridor through Bonita. Residential uses are allowed as a conditional use in the Frontier Village area, but only at a single given location that is marked on a map, and that is currently the location of the Sunnyside Senior Apartments. Senior citizen housing projects and second or third story senior apartments are allowed anywhere in the Frontier Village Area 2 of Creative Growth Zone as a conditional use. And next slide, please, Deborah. So this is a map of the Creative Growth Zone. You can see the hatched area marked with the number 2. That is the Area 2 Frontier Village that we will be talking about for this possible municipal code text amendment. And next slide, please. So there are 3 properties in Creative Growth Area 2 which have been identified as previously having had second floor residential units. Those three are 215 West Bonita Avenue. That's also known as the Fisher Building historically, and is currently the location of the Puzzle Zoo. 163 West Bonita Avenue, historically known as the Forsman and Hoke Building. That is currently the location of the printing shop. And 154 West Bonita Avenue, the Johnstone Building. All three of these properties had legally permitted second floor apartments prior to 1937. And in every case, the residential use has been discontinued for a minimum of 10 years. As the residential use is currently non-conforming in the area, all three properties have lost the right to restore the residential units to a use. This is just a map showing the three locations with the existing residential units. They're all three kind of centered around the Bonita and Monte Vista intersection. So 215 West Bonita Avenue, it was historically known as the Fisher Building, built in 1905. It originally utilized the first floor as a commercial and restaurant space. The second floor was used by several local fraternal organizations, as well as for community dances. We don't have an exact year, but in approximately 1920, the second floor was converted into apartments. There are currently 4 possible apartments on the second floor of that building. The exact date that the residential use of the building was discontinued is not known, but we do have a memo dated July 12th, 1996 from then City Manager Don Prune discussing the condition of the apartments. As far as we know, those are the last apartments in the area that were actually being utilized as a residence. Second building is 1963 West Bonita Avenue. It was constructed in 1910 as a hardware store. The second floor originally served as a social center used by the Chamber of Commerce, the Masons, and other organizations. At a later date, the second floor was converted into apartments. We don't know the exact date of that. We do have a permit dated October 11th, 1937, which shows the division of one large dwelling unit into smaller bedrooms and kitchens. We don't know exactly how many smaller bedrooms and kitchens it created. We just have the permit, which doesn't show the specifics. And again, the date that the residential use of the building was discontinued is not known. 154 West Bonita Avenue, also known as the Johnstone Building. This one was purpose-built in 1911 with apartments on the second floor and storefronts on the first floor. Again, the exact date that the residential use was discontinued is not known. So we had an application for municipal code text amendment by Jay Demirsift. He is the owner of the Puzzle Zoo building. He would like to reestablish the residential use as a permitted use. Allowing the reestablishment of all these units within the Frontier Village area would reestablish historic residential uses. Like we said, all these uses were there prior to 1937. It would keep the historical theme and nature of the Frontier Village area. These are some of the oldest buildings in the city, and the residential use was a big part of what they were. It would bring pedestrian traffic and new customers to downtown stores and restaurants. And perhaps most importantly, it would bring investment into existing historic buildings. Staff at this time recommends that a municipal code text amendment be initiated that would permit the reestablishment of the historic residential units as a conditional use permit. Although the applicant did simply say permitted, allowing them as a conditional use permit would be in line with the other residential uses in the area, and it would allow staff to identify and mitigate any potential issues on a case-by-case basis. So as previously stated, staff recommends that the City Council initiate a municipal code text amendment to amend section 18.140, CG Creative Growth Zone. That's my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions from staff or from council.
Ken, when we talked about the Johnstone building, I believe right during the period of time of redevelopment going away, we were currently surveying that property using John Sorcinelli, okay, this would be allowing them to go back and rehash that and look at it and possibly build the apartments there too?
Yes, yeah, there was a study done previously by John Sorcinelli. They came up with a potential layout for the building. It was never moved forward with, but it is still existing, and they could reinstate that if they wanted to, but they would also be open to laying it out however they wish to.
Okay. Have we had any contact with the owners of the Johnstone building to let them know that this was occurring?
We have, and they are very interested.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from council?
Yeah, at this point, we don't know what the condition is in any of those second stories, do we?
We know it's not good. We don't know exactly. I haven't been into them, but the Johnstone building and the apartments above the Puzzle Zoo would both require extensive renovations. The area above the print shop would be a little different. As far as from what I understand, they still use it. It's just more of an office space and storage area.
So they would have to come back to the city with plans to rehabilitate this area.
Yes, it would move forward just like any other action proposing a new use or a new layout. So it would still come back. We'd make it a conditional use, so it would go to Planning Commission where we could take care of any issues. And they would have to present us with full plans showing how they were modernizing the building, bringing it up to current fire codes, building codes.
Okay.
And letting us take a look at what they were.
So they just couldn't start renting them out right away then?
No, it won't just be like a poof and this happens. They will have to go through the process.
Okay, thank you very much. I would vote in favor of this. I think it's a very good idea myself.
Any other questions?
Nice job.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll assume that was a motion.
That was the motion.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye, and then
Aye.
okay.
I don't think
call?
we need roll call
Yes.
because we're all here.
That's right. We don't have John Ebner.
We don't need John. Okay. All right. So it was four ayes, one abstention because he's recused himself. Right. Motion carries 4-1. One abstention. Abstaining.
Abstention.
Never mind that word.
You were right the first time.
Huh?
You was right the first time.
Right. Okay. Well, that's good because we're going to get some, at least in the Puzzle Zoo, or puzzle building, they're going to get some more because I understand that the owner of the building is very motivated. He wants to get some folks in there, and he's also helping with a barbecue restaurant next door. So I think he wants to bring some clients in for the barbecue restaurant. So, okay, we're going to go to B. Is John back online? You there, John? John?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Looking for the unmute button. Got it.
Okay, we're going to go to the mid-year budget review and a recommended budget amendments. Staff is recommending City Council approve. We're going to turn it over to the city manager who will introduce whoever he introduces.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With us today, we have our Admin Services Manager, Mr. Michael O'Brien. We're going to tag team a presentation. Michael is going to start with going over the mid-year review and some of the changes. The recommended action will be strictly focused on cleanup transactions to ensure what we project to expend for the full year is fully approved by an appropriation of council, so that when the auditors come in at the end of the year, that all our appropriations are above our expenditures, so we meet all the requirements there. So I'll let him start with the presentation, and I'll continue with a fiscal condition presentation after that.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. It's Michael O'Brien, Administrative Services Manager. Tonight, we'll be reviewing the mid-year activity as of January 31st and the effects that the activity will have on the anticipated year-end balances. We'll also be reviewing the one-time activities that have had a significant impact on the year's revenue and expense totals. And then next, we'll discuss the revised reserve estimates and future expenditures to consider when looking ahead to the 21-22 fiscal year budget. Lastly, our city manager, Mr. Constantine, will review the building blocks of financial stability and how we currently stand on that spectrum. So as we kind of go back to the beginning and we look at where we start the year, the 2019-20 accounting fund balance was $33,714,417. When we begin to adjust this figure to our general fund reserve, the city's historical methodology for determining reserves was to take the fund balance down to the actual cash that is associated with the fund, meaning cash in the bank. To get to that figure, we have to remove the non-spendable $12,713,796 that represents loans to the former redevelopment agency that is considered owed but not yet received. The next item is an assigned fund balance for equipment replacement that is actually incorporated with Fund 70's equipment reserve and is displayed as part of its budget. When you back out these figures, you end up with $20,771,068 reserve total. Now, if we go back to the accounting of the fund, you'll see that $20,771,068 is broken out into assigned and unassigned balances. At one point or another, the council has assigned $3,963,102 of general fund balance to be exclusive for use of expenditures related to risk management, emergency cost, a general plan update, and National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System charges, or NPDES. These assigned balances can be unassigned by the council at any time, but at this point are restricted. When we back out that, we are left with an unassigned fund balance of $16,807,966, which can be used for any general purpose. Now, when we look even further into the accounting and take a wider perspective by reviewing all the government-wide funds, we see how other funds as unassigned fund balances can have an impact on the general fund's ability to use this unassigned balance. Later in the presentation, Mr. Constantine will provide more detail on a negative unassigned fund balance related to the golf course and its effects on the availability of our unassigned fund balance for general use. So in the terms of the 2021 fiscal year's effect on our cash reserve balance, we see that we start with $20,771,068, the figure that we mentioned in the previous slide. From there, we add additional adopted revenue and transfers in, we subtract the adopted expenditures and transfer out, and then we subtract budget amendments and prior year carryovers that have been adopted by the council. And this leaves us with an anticipated balance of $18,501,729, which would leave us $2,269,399 less than where we started the year. After reviewing the activity at mid-year, we have determined that the revenues are likely to come in $1,825,000 above estimates, and expenditures will come in $145,000 below their expected budget. This expenditure line item includes the recommended budget amendments, and we will go into more detail into the following slides. In the end, our revised estimated fund balance should be $300,000 less than where we began, landing at approximately $20,471,729. These estimates are based on 6 months of data and could have significant changes depending on the next 6 months' activity. So as we dive into those estimated increases and we look into the revenue adjustments, these are basically based on estimates from our property and sales tax consultants, HCL companies, who have determined that property taxes should come in about $150,000 ahead of estimates, and salary taxes should come in $1,851,536 above estimates. This is partially offset by decreases in anticipated revenues in the categories of use and money and property, which is basically related to significant decreases in interest rates. And part of the use of money and property is the rental of our facilities, which due to COVID-19 restrictions, we have not been able to have any rental activity at all. So we basically had to wash out all those revenues that we were anticipating. COVID-19 restrictions have also had a significant impact on our recreation programs and recreation center operations. And in total, those three categories will have decreases of roughly $476,536. However, we did also have CARES Act funding, which came in at just above $419,000, and majority of those expenditures related to those funds were expensed in the 1920 year. However, we do have about $119,000 of COVID-related expenditures that are taking place this year. So the net of that is an increase of about $300,000, and that's how we get to that $1,825,000 number. As far as expenditures, Due to vacancies that have been taking place across the year and the significant time it's taken to replace those vacancies, we're looking at salary and benefit reductions of about $419,000. And then we have the budgeted amendments that we're requesting tonight. And then we also have an increase of $20,000 of expenditures related to Fund 8. In total, it'll be about a net decrease of expected expenditures of $145,000. Next slide. When reviewing these anomalies, we have to consider the fact that some of these are one-time revenues and expenditures. As far as COVID-19 related sales tax figures, there was some very large one-time, what we believe to be one-time sales related COVID-19 activity. We also had the CARES Act funding that we received that is one time. At this time, we don't know for sure if there will be any additional CARES Act funding through stimulus packages. And then the personnel savings, we're assuming that we're going to be able to fill our vacant budgeted positions, and that will basically eliminate those savings. So in total, we had about $1,499,000 in one-time increased revenues and reduced expenditures. So if we look and try to factor in what the effect of not having those one-time savings would have been, instead of having a $300,000 loss, we would have likely had a total loss of just under $1.8 million, which would have took us down to $18,972,729.
Mike, just real quick, the COVID-19 related sales tax one time, can you just give an example of what that would be?
So a lot of it's related to testing kits and things like that. That was a large federal purchase that was done. I can't get into real specifics without trying to give away who that would be. So
right. The bottom line is there are entities in the community that are involved with that, and that is related. That's what this is related to.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Excellent. So, and also looking at some of the other special revenue fund adjustments that assist us in producing infrastructure programs and capital projects. Due to the latest DOF estimates, or Department of Finance estimates, we're looking at having decreases in those revenues that would total $220,367. So, in terms of attachment A, which is the amendments, the city budget provides appropriation authority to expend funds. When expenditure items are projected to exceed budget authority, a budget adjustment is necessary. Cleanup budget amendments are proposed to match projected expenditures to an approved budget appropriation. So tonight, city staff recommends the city council approve the proposed budget amendments, attachment A, which are summarized as an increase in general fund budget appropriations by $265,746, which includes a transfer into the landscape maintenance fund totaling $20,000, an increase in landscape maintenance fund by $19,700 for expenditures. So as we look towards the next fiscal year, when we take into effect that we're looking at one-time revenues that are going to have a decrease in what our current year's revenues are going for next year, we also have to take into account some large expenditure increases that we're going to be pretty sure to have coming next year. One of those is CalPERS unfunded liability annual payment will be increased by $142,000. We'll have a minimum wage increase that will come into effect January 1, lifting the minimum wage from $14 to $15. That will have a impaction increase of about 7% to all the steps on the part-time salary schedule. So this should be about approximately $75,000 in increases for next year. Public safety the last couple of years has had about 5% increases the last 2 years, which have been about $450,000 a year in additional expenditures. We're expecting that could possibly be taking effect again this year, or for the 21-22 year, so we have to take that into consideration. We also have full-time and regular part-time, just full-time benefit increases for grade step increases and longevity that gets factored in during the year, which will probably be about $85,000. And then there will also be contractual increases for vendors who have COLA adjustments written into their contracts. We'll have infrastructure needs that we'll have to consider and vehicle replacement.
So if our income isn't increased for the 21-22, this money would have to come out of the reserves.
Yeah, it would be structurally imbalanced at this time unless we could make enough cuts to have our revenues cover our expenditures.
So some heavy decisions have to be made.
Right. To recap, in terms of what's important from the presentation, it was a very good detailed presentation. We projected this current year that when we passed the budget, that we'd be looking at about a $2.2 million deficit because of the COVID virus and a variety of other factors. We were pleasantly surprised that revenues came in higher, and then the vacancy savings that the interim city manager, Brad McKinney, held firm on generated savings that reduced that deficit down to a negative $300,000. However, of that swing, so mind you, at the end of the year, we're still predicting we're spending more than we have available, and so we're in a deficit position. 1.5 million of the swing, which is the majority, a large share of that, was all one-time funding that we cannot rely on in the future. In particular, a big chunk of that was a sales tax boost because of very unique purchases that were related to the COVID virus from certain businesses that reduced our deficit. If nothing changes next year, if our revenue is exactly the same, if our expenditures were exactly the same, but we lost out on all the one-time money, we would be predicting again next year of over $2 million deficit hole that we would have to address. So yes, we have some challenges we're going to have to face, and that's partly why I'm leading into the next part of the presentation, which is something we'll speak to today. You'll hear it again later, and then you'll hear it again during the summer when we do a more full assessment of our financial condition and make recommendations of what we need to start looking at to shore up that deficit. In terms of a city organization, we should always be looking at how we're doing, constantly assessing, constantly changing to the conditions. Our viability as an organization financially is paramount because nobody else provides the services that we provide. And when you look at a city and determine how do you know they're doing well financially and whatnot, there's two different documents that really apply. On the front end, there's the budget. So before we start off the year, we approve a budget that creates authorizations of what we can spend money on. And we adjust that budget during the course of the year. The year concludes, and approximately within 6 months after the close of the year, there's the CAFR, or the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, that's issued that recaps the previous year. And so those are the two documents that bookend a year. Now you can take both those two documents and take a look at them, but they're very extensive, they're very long, and even finance professionals in government have a hard time fully understanding and grappling with what does this really mean for us as an organization, and what does it mean for our taxpayers and residents about the services that we're going to provide and will provide in the future. And so the accounting ease is not easy for the general public to look at. And so I've been working on a model to how we better represent the information so an average taxpayer resident can follow along. And we do this to ensure transparency and to reframe how we're presenting the city's financial condition. And so the model I've come up with, and there are many models out there, the ICMA, the International City Managers Association, the Government Finance Officers Association, and a variety of private professors and others have created all kinds of models. But the next slide would highlight what I call the financial pyramid. The financial pyramid is mirrored after the pyramids in Egypt. That every layer of a pyramid on the bottom is a foundation to the next layer above it. And so with a weak foundation, the entire pyramid is at risk of toppling. And that pyramid exists in some type of environment. Most of the time you'll see it in the sunshine, sometimes it'll be cloudy, other times it'll be raining and hailing with major windstorms. It just really depends on how the environment, what the environment is that has an effect on every layer in the financial pyramid. And we start off with the foundation, the dark green of available cash. We will know right away when we can't cut checks to payroll, to staff, how bad a situation would be if we didn't have cash. When we have cash, which we're fortunate enough that we're very strong in our cash position here in San Dimas, we have reserves that are intended to take on unanticipated expenditures that we have available that we didn't budget for. We then go higher into different liabilities and capital obligations, these are larger dollar valued multi-year obligations. In some cases, you can defer it, like roads and road conditions, but you can only defer it so long before the expenses exponentially grow. Then we have the operating capacity, which is how we are able to offer our day-to-day activities, people, systems, money that we're using during the course of the year. And all of that props up the most important thing that we do as an organization, is all the activities that we offer to the public, the taxpayers, and residents. In terms of in cash flow, the question that we really have to answer is, do we have enough cash to pay the bills? And so in the city of San Dimas, we can go for a number of months paying the bills off of the cash that we have in the cash pool. But what do we mean by a cash pool? Governmental accounting is all about accounting for money. We have the general fund that is unrestricted money, but we have all kinds of other funds that have legal restrictions on them. So we put them in different buckets called funds to account for them, and each fund has to sit on its own. It has revenue, expenditures, transfers, and a fund balance. And at the end of the year, June 30th, all of our funds have to be at the bottom line 0 or positive. But we don't necessarily have a bazillion different bank accounts that we keep all our cash. We keep it generally in one large cash pool. And so that cash pool may have millions of dollars, but segments of that cash pool aren't available to just spend for anything. They're legally restricted. And so even though we have a good deal of cash, you also have to take out cash that you can't actually spend legally. So some cases when we do bond indebtedness, we have bond covenants that say you must set aside $2 million and hold in reserves to only expend at a point in time in which you can't make the bond payment that year. Well, that $2 million, guess what? You need to treat it like you cannot spend it, so that if I can't make payroll, well, I may have $2 million in the bank, but I'm not going to be able to make payroll because I can't utilize that $2 million. So that number, you have to account for it that way. In terms of the reserve funding, it's really intended to have you operate for a period of time if you were receiving no revenue or had very significant expenses, some major event, major expenditure, a massive lawsuit of $6 million that our insurance wouldn't cover, and now you have to find the money somewhere that you didn't anticipate. Or a major pandemic that you see a dramatic drop in our revenues that we didn't predict during the course of the year, and for a year or two you want to shore up that hole so that you're continuing the services, because once you pass that 2-year period, revenues go back up and you're now back in a positive position. You temporarily bridged the gap for those 2 years. In terms of our liabilities, these are multi-year obligations. The biggest one that we derive is our employee benefit costs. I treat multi-year obligations like a credit card. We incur an obligation like we're incurring a charge on a credit card, and then there's a payment to be made every year, and there's an interest charge that goes with it. A lot of the times, once I buy something on the credit card, I forget about that obligation and then continue spending money as if I can spend all my revenue today, but I have to remember that I always have to make that credit card payment because it will always be there. And if I don't make the right amount of payment, the interest rates increase that annual payment as years go on, and that's what we're seeing in our pensions. We also have, building loans or debt that we may take that also is considered a multi-year obligation. When we receive money, and we, for example, community development block grant or money that's restricted, we have a purpose for which we're spending that money. Well, there have been instances where cities or counties have failed to comply with the purposes for which they received that money. In that case, that money potentially becomes an obligation to pay back to the granting agency. It could be FEMA if it was related to certain public safety grants. It could be HUD if it involves housing-related activity. That type of liability of failing to perform and needing to pay that money back would be considered a liability in the pyramid. Capital obligations. The majority of the value that we have as an organization on paper exists in tangible assets. Most people look at our roadways and they don't see roadways as actually being an asset, but it is. An asset is an object or benefit that has a multi-year benefit to the organization. It's typically something you can touch. The building we're in right now, the streets that we have, the park space, the sidewalks, the trees are all considered capital assets. And those are depreciated over time to reflect the life expectancy and value that those assets may have. Our operating capacity is everything that we have and we do to be able to provide the activities on a regular basis. And the activities is everything that we do as an organization that offers a benefit to a taxpayer or resident. Our environment, the sun, which is not quite a very bright sun that's operating right now. It's a little hazy and cloudy in terms of the amount of revenue and impact it's having on us. The environment can be affected by a wide variety of things. Our revenue capacity. We can compare ourselves against other organizations and realize the capacity for us to generate revenue to offer services may not equal those that are around us. The city doesn't offer utility users tax, and I'm not making a judgment for or against, but we have to reflect that some organizations generate 2, 3, 4 million on utility users tax. So if a similar organization our size in the similar area with the similar services has that and we don't, our revenue capacity is lower. We have risk exposures, a pandemic. That's an exposure. That will impact everything about what we do from a financial perspective. And then there are a whole host of other things that could hit us, federal mandates, decisions to subsidize activity, and all of those have a positive and negative impact to the environment in the context for which we operate, and they impact all the 5 different layers on the pyramid. In looking at an objective way to compare ourselves to other cities, because most of the time we look to other cities to see how they're doing, what they're doing, and then to integrate and implement what we think is the best practice because somebody else is doing it. I find that the California State Auditor, who created a high-risk cities program, while not perfect, is a pretty good measure of how we can compare ourselves to other cities around us. So what they did is they took a look, and they created this program back in 2013. They took a look at a large number of factors or measures from cities that had filed for bankruptcy: San Bernardino, Stockton, Vallejo. And they looked at those trends on those measures to determine which measures and what kind of change would reflect a city in very high fiscal distress. And if we start looking at those measures and looking and tracking all our cities, as we see cities that show higher risk or real high risk, we as the state auditors will take a look and conduct audits of those to help make recommendations to put those organizations back on the right path. And all 10 measures are not weighted equally, but all 10 measures will add up to 100 points. In 2016-17, San Dimas, and not all cities report financials publicly, so you'll see the number of cities that are in this program vary every year. So in the first year, 2016-17, that I have listed here, 476 cities had publicly facing financials that were used in the analysis, and we were ranked 443rd, which meant 32 cities or 33 cities above us were stronger or at lower risk financially of distress than we were, which is an incredibly strong position to be in. We were extremely low risk. 2 years later, in both the intervening year and the second year, to 2018-19, we fell a number of spots down to 379 out of a smaller number of pool of cities, 453. But we are now, there are 74 cities, or we're the 74th least risky city. We are still low risk. And so while we've been sliding in the wrong direction for a variety of reasons, to the community and to the council, we need to understand we're not a moderate or we're not a high risk. We're still a low risk, although we're weakening over time. And I think the deficits that we projected last year to this year, the deficits that we're showing we're going to end this year, and most likely, depending on how the numbers play out, the deficit we'll be projecting for the following fiscal year continue to play into our fiscal strength and how strong we are as an organization. The next slide, and I'm not sure how it portrays on the TV, but you'll be able to read it on the slide deck, shows the 10 measures with a color-coded green, yellow, and red to reflect what is low, moderate, or high risk. I've expanded the ones that are only moderate or high risk and left the green ones compressed. And I'll just highlight the first green one, which is a general fund reserve. General fund reserves represent 30 points out of the 100 points for the entire analysis. And this council has historically taken an extremely financial conservative approach to reserves, which is why we garnered all 30 points. The measure of getting all 30 points is a minimum of 70% of your general fund expenditures. We are in excess of 78%. On the revenue trends, we showed to be a moderate risk. We're still growing in revenues over these years. And mind you, these are 1 year in arrears. We had a 7% annual growth. It would take 10% to reflect being a low risk. And why such a high percentage? Because our expenditures, the expenditures we need to accommodate every year are exceedingly increasing. Pensions becoming one of the largest contributors to that, as well as other post-employment benefits. So a 10% growth rate is a safe, low risk to cover those ever-increasing expenditures. Our pension funding level is at 77%, so it's just shy of being a low risk, but we're very on the cusp of that. Our future pension costs are moderate risk, although we're still on the better end of that. Some cities have 200 and 300 and 400% of their general fund expenditures in the amount of liability in their pensions. We don't. A big part of that is because we don't have public safety retirement systems, which are the ones that have exponentially grown in liabilities. And then lastly, other post-employment benefits or medical benefits we're showing as a high risk because we have $0 funded for those benefits. Now, I just will asterisk that one. That's the one that flipped red this last year that was a yellow before. By just looking at this graphic, you could say, my goodness, we're high risk when it comes to OPEB funding, other post-employment benefit fundings. But you look at the item right before that, and it has OPEB obligations, and it says it's low risk. Well, the obligations is the total amount that we owe. That currently in our last CAFR is about $2.3 million. That's a small number in comparison to the $24 million in expenditures that we incur. But if you didn't fund any of that $2.4 million, the state auditor looks at you as being a high risk. Well, we could transfer $2 million right now from reserves to that liability and still treat it as a reserve, and we would be green and looking at strong, all 5 points, and that will push us up probably about 60 positions in the ranking that we have just by doing that, which is something that we want to consider. So while this looks like we have a high risk in this area, I just want to raise the asterisk. Don't treat it like it's high risk. It's just how the state auditor has classified it. We'll skip this next slide as it's a duplicate. So I wanted to address a couple of preliminary items that I had in my first 8 weeks here that I had seen. And Mr. O'Brien mentioned the first one. We look at our unassigned fund balance as the amount of money that we have available in the bank for an emergency, and we've been very conservative at building that dollar amount to what was listed as $16.8 million. Fantastic. But the question you have to ask when you look at that, Michael mentioned it, when you look at all the governmental funds, of which the general fund is one of 5 government funds, you have to add all the bottom line pluses and minuses together to get a combined number of what the real number that's available. So we have plus 16 million in the general fund and negative almost 8 million in the golf course, which is revenue that we're owed from interest payments on the loan that we haven't received. And so when you get to the end of the fiscal year, June 30th, you have to be at 0 or positive in each fund. It's something I mentioned earlier to close out the books. So what technically happens, we adjust and move 8 million from the general fund to cover the 8 million in the golf course. Then the next fiscal year, you reverse the transactions. And many cities do that because from an accounting perspective, you have to balance the books. But the question you have to ask, what the average taxpayer needs to ask, what the council has to ask, if I had to spend money today and that I have to leave that money out there spent for a year, can I spend $16 million right now out of the general fund? And the answer is no. We could spend $8 million, because at the end of the year, we still have to balance that negative $8 million from the golf course. And so while we look at that number and say, wow, you guys are at 78 or higher % reserve, you're right, but understand that doesn't mean we have 78% of our expenditures that we can expend on anything else and that we're all good for a year. We only have 8 million, and we should be planning as if we have 8 million. The second item, that sales tax revenue, when it's one time, like the ones we experienced this year, are not reliable. Sales tax is very elastic. The economy could have a dramatic effect on sales tax. And if we're in a property value bubble, well, for the next couple of years, property values may also be a little more elastic than they typically are. And so we should treat that sales tax revenue as only one time. In providing all the services that we offer, it is our people that provide the services. That's the most important aspect after being able to pay for payroll and the bills to provide the services. A number of different positions have been held vacant, but the city has already been in a very lean staffing model. In a lot of cases, we only have one position that do critical functions. In other cases, right now, we have 0. We have, in some functions, we have vacancies where it's only one position, so therefore there's nobody backfilling that position with that level of expertise. We also haven't looked at our salary tables and job classifications to understand, do the job descriptions fully match the jobs that we're performing, and are the compensations competitive for the salaries and activities that we're performing? In some cases, we'll be below, in other cases, we'll be above, but it's something we should be assessing regularly. And that is something that I will be most likely recommending in next year's budget, to do a classification and a compensation study. We also need to look at training. The city has been very conservative for a large number of years, holding back on expenditures. I mean, it was amazing to walk into the organization and see what a good job people, the city didn't just spend money willy-nilly. But when we look at certain areas, sometimes you have to spend money to make money, or spend money to improve. And the area of training is one of those areas. The total citywide budget of training for the city is $6,000. Yet we have more than 100 people when you consider full-time and part-time individuals. So that's woefully underfunded. So that is one area that I am making a priority for our employees, to focus on a training program that adds value to them as an employee in their current position, allows them to expand and grow into a higher level position, and allows them to get the certifications and expand to do positions across their function. So I may be a tree worker, that all I do is tree work, but why can't I do road work? Why can't I do landscape work? That's the same classification. Let's offer an opportunity for those employees to gain those skill sets, and then they become more versatile for the city and the taxpayers, and improve upon themselves and have a feeling of continuous learning and support from the organization. When an organization is budgetarily imbalanced, and what do I mean by unbalanced? The revenue coming in is less than the expenditures going out, is in a nutshell. So we're spending more than we're taking in. That formula is a little more complex, because it's not just the money that's coming in, it's the money that's coming in and the money we bring into that fund, like the general fund, from other sources. For example, gas tax could transfer into the general fund to cover public works employees. So that revenue and that transfer coming in, minus what we spend, and the money we have to shell out to other funds that are in a deficit position. If the bottom line then is negative, we are structurally imbalanced. The ideal would be if you just took revenue the city got, sales tax, property tax, and just deleted and subtracted all our expenditures. If you're in a positive position, that's the strongest structurally balanced position that we could be in. We can be in that position, but it's the transfer outs the general fund has to push to different funds that flips the equation to the negative and puts us in a deficit. In 2019-20, the imbalance was about 1.3 million. Now we've reduced that to about 300,000. but there is opportunities for us to reduce that even further. Michael, on his last slide, mentioned a number of different items we have to consider in the following year. We have some substantial liabilities that are a burden over the long run. It doesn't mean we have to pay them all in 1 year, but there are liabilities that are going to grow, and there are liabilities that its annual payment will become a bigger and bigger burden to the city. Pensions are at about 12 million. They're scheduled to grow a number of millions greater than that over the next 5 to 7 years. So our annual payments are going to go up. I think this next year we're estimating about $140,000 to $150,000 a year. Our post-employment benefits are 2.2 million. That too, we're not going to have to shell out in 1 year, but those are expenditures that we already put on the credit card, and we're going to have to pay them at some point. Compensated absences are leave balances that have to be paid out. When an employee retires, you have to pay out their vacation. When they leave, you pay out vacation. You have to pay out, in some cases, sick time, or sick time gets attached to retirement. It just depends how you treat that liability. We're looking at about 1.1 million of that liability, so that if we shut down the city today and made all the payments to the employees for their leave balances that they're owed, it equals 1.1 million. Bond debt payable, about 6.6 million. I won't go into too much detail. That's debt for bonds that we have. But the one right before that, annual street maintenance, is the very significant one. I would hope the council and the public take note. When we look at streets, and the cities do it the same way, we hire consultants and we do a pavement condition index review. That's an index that's on 100 points. A brand new street is 100 points. A street that literally is unusable is 0. At 25 and below, you're considered full reconstruction. In the 75 or 80 or greater, you're considered in good condition. And if I have to spend $1 in maintenance when I'm in good condition, I would have to spend $14 when I'm under 25 points in reconstruction. So while I could wait to make that payment to do maintenance and save that money and do something else, well, the bill gets bigger and bigger and bigger later on. And what happens to a city, it means I do fewer and fewer and fewer streets because I don't have the money to pay for it. So we're currently rated at 58 out of 100 points. We're average. To just move us to 60 and to do the ADA requirements that are required when you do street projects for sidewalk access and whatnot, we need a minimum of $3.75 million. Now that number was presented to me and I asked, that's not too bad. We can do that over the next 10 years. No. That's annual. 3.75 million annually. To move up to 75, which is the benchmark where organizations should go, we're looking at excess of $5 million. We're not including sidewalks, except for ADA requirements. We're not including parks. We're not including physical buildings like the one we're sitting in, the rec center, or anything else. That's the number. That's just for streets and related expenditures for ADA. So as you can clearly see, when we look at the financial pyramid and we move up to capital, our significant weakest is going to be in capital. When we look at our lifeblood, which is our revenue, our cash, we generate our revenue from property, sales tax, fines, fees. Fees are intended to recover the cost of providing a service. And many cities just charge full cost recovery. If I bring in building plans for my new house and it costs $12,000, everything involved to do the house from start to finish, the fees I'm paying is $12,000. Prop 26 prohibits us from charging more than cost recovery. So if it's $12,000, you can charge up to $12,000. And cities do fee and nexus studies to determine what those fees and what they should be. What I'm finding here in the city of San Dimas, and it's a policy call, that we want to keep fees the lowest that we possibly can, and so we will subsidize our activities through the general fund. And in many cases, that's the right approach. For example, if we assess what it costs to provide a recreational program for our seniors that helps seniors become physically active, if we assumed and calculated the cost is $100 per participant, We as a city may choose to subsidize 80% of that, so the fee is $20, because we want to encourage seniors to be active, because by encouraging seniors to be active, their longevity increases and their productivity and quality of life improves. That's a good item to subsidize. On the flip side, I have a developer who wants to do a subdivision for which they're going to sell parcels and generate net profit for themselves. The calculus on that may or may not equal subsidizing 80%. You may subsidize something because there will be an economic impact from that activity, but you may also choose to say, you will recoup all your costs that you're paying the city. Why should the city actually have to pay any portion of that? Because it's not the city paying for it, it's the taxpayers. So the taxpayers are subsidizing that. So in next year's budget, to ensure that the policy direction of the council is fully implemented, I'm going to recommend funding of a fee and nexus study, and then the council can determine what fees should be subsidized, what level, and what fees should be full cost recovery, so that we're ensuring we're capturing revenue and reducing the subsidy the general fund has on activities, and that the general fund then can continue to fund capital, our biggest weakness, and the rest of the activities, public safety and whatnot. So this is just an introduction to the concept of the financial pyramid, some discussion of items that I found already, but you will be seeing this again, and I'll be trying to tie back financial discussions to the pyramid and these concepts so that there's consistency from what you're seeing and what the public is seeing. And so with that, I will turn it back to the mayor and the council for questions.
Questions? Questions of the city manager and our Michael?
Well, I've just got one question for each slide. I'm just kidding. It's a very good presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I too wanted to first commend Michael and Chris. I think the presentation was really well done, just in terms of the format as well as the math. It's the first time I've actually seen it done like that since I've been here. So thank you for that, and the explanations I think are meaningful. I think the community should have gotten a lot out of it. I got a lot out of it. So, and I appreciate Chris and the follow-up with all of the items that you brought forward. I think there is a lot of things that council needs to be thinking about strategically over the next 24 to 36 months. And I think it's prudent to bring them up now so that we can start thinking about them as we get into the budget exercise coming up here. So thank you for that.
Any further questions?
Yeah, that was the only thing. I was going to say almost exactly what Ryan said. I do appreciate this kind of a report, and it's good to come at this time because, it's good to hear it now and then hear how it develops over the next few months, and for the council and the public to see what's coming. It's also valuable for the public to see some of the comments about, how we handle fees and other things. I, like everybody else, want to keep fees low, but it's good to hear and just lay it on the table that if we keep a fee low here, or if we don't address a deficit over there, whether it's a liability or something else, that those things have an effect on the bottom line, and they really cause or help to cause what is a structural imbalance. So the job of the council is to decide what policies do we want to have in place so we don't have a structural imbalance, at least working toward that goal. So I really appreciate, and as Ryan said, I thought the presentation, was very detailed, had a lot of math behind it, but I really appreciate that, and I think it was presented in a way that the public can understand. At least, I think they can understand it, and I think that I'm just thinking out loud here that at some point during the budget session, or maybe it's the summer, I'm not sure when, it would be great to have, I don't know if I want to call it a town hall or a special meeting or whatever, where the public is able to ask questions directly on these various slides and all the information there. So anyway, thanks a lot.
The only follow-up I would say is, little animation maybe with the adding and subtracting next time. Just you can take it up one notch.
I'll definitely attempt to up my PowerPoint game for the next.
There you go. There you go. Mr. Mayor, I would make a motion to approve the proposed budget amendments in attachment A as recommended by staff.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye. And roll call, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Bertone,
Aye.
Councilmember Ebner,
Aye.
Councilmember Vienna,
Aye.
Councilmember Weber,
Aye.
Mayor Bedar.
Aye.
Motion carries by 5-0 vote.
The only thing I have to say is that it's very interesting that this is coming forth now, and I think we have to start solving the problem immediately instead of saying, well, let's wait till next year, or let's wait 2 years because we have the reserves and we can cover ourselves. So I think this is something that we should start working on tomorrow.
So may I speak to that point? So something else that I found in this organization that was unusual to me is the degree of education we provided to our staff about our financial condition and position. And so to that end, the presentation that you saw, elements of that were presented to the employee organization, the leadership. And during an all-city meeting we had this past Monday, I presented this again, the financial pyramid, to all staff. So they start to get educated on what we're talking about, what the council is seeing, because we're going to have to move in a direction where we build a sense of urgency and get buy-in to make changes that strengthen our financial position. Because one of the directions council gave when you selected and appointed me was reviewing and ensuring the financial stability of this organization, and I do take that to heart. And so we've already started looking at all kinds of different elements to accomplish that. And we'll continue to.
Any further? All I want to say is that it's been very enlightening and really was difficult for me to adjust to the fact that we didn't really have a process. Now it seems like we're moving in that direction, and I want to thank you. But more importantly, I want to thank your staff because they've embraced it. And from what I can see, I truly appreciate it, Michael, Brad, and the rest of the staff who's been listening to these things that are going on in these meetings, because they hear that, we get the feedback, all the time from people just kind of talking, and I appreciate the fact that they are buying into it and understanding where you're going with this, but thank you very much. Okay. So that passed 5-0. And we're going to move on to 4C, COVID-19 City Council evaluations of past meetings, structures, including public comment process, and direction for any changes in further meetings. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the February 9th meeting, Mayor Bedar and Councilmember Ebner requested that the City Council review changes that we have made to our council meeting, more specifically to the process for public comment. So what we've prepared for you is a staff report that I believe provides sufficient information to be able to start the discussion and the evaluation at the council level. I've identified 2 executive orders by the governor that relate to the Brown Act. I've identified a little bit of narrative language for what was written in our agenda reports and agenda items from previous meetings just prior to COVID, during the most recent time, and now as we're going forward. I did not go historically back many, many, many years, but I wanted to provide enough for you to be able to have a policy discussion, and so staff is ready to take any input that you may have or direction. So with that, I'll turn it back to the mayor.
Okay. Any questions of City Manager? John, I think you wanted to bring this forward, so I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the staff report that's in tonight's agenda. One of the main reasons I brought it back was because when we originally heard this, which was 2 meetings ago, there was no staff report indicating what we were planning to do or what we were considering. And, I myself was caught a little bit by surprise about the direction that took. The agenda item on that particular meeting, January 26th, simply said under COVID-19 update, discussion and direction from City Council regarding COVID changes to regular City Council meetings. And the one thing that did have a direct bearing on that was, and again, there was no staff report outlining options or suggestions of what might happen, but I can see where the in-person and the precautions to take, which we have taken, to allow people to appear in person again, that was kind of a direct bearing on the COVID situation. The rest kind of arose during the discussion, and I couldn't help but have the feeling that somebody else knew what was going on, but I really hadn't heard about it. So, I know there were some comments about the length that meetings were taking because of the public comment. But so right now we're on a temporary way of doing it, where we're just having the comments at the start. And on this particular agenda, it was good because the agenda reports were all really detailed, so the public could see what they were and could make comments on them at that time. But so I'll just make my comment, and we'll see what anybody else has to say. And then I think with the staff report, we could make more of a informed decision on what we want to do for the next little while, at least. So in general, ever since I've been on the council, I felt that we should have more public engagement, not less, and that it's really our job to listen to the public in a public forum where people are talking not only to the council, but to each other, or they're having other people hear them. And I like that way of doing things, where they're actually talking and saying things for the wider audience. The one thing I'm going to just comment on is should we have public comments during the agenda items themselves? And my opinion, as you know, is that we should invite people and encourage them to talk during the items themselves. There are a lot of reasons for that, but for one thing, the staff verbalizing a report and having all the slides, and then the council having follow-up questions to that right before the public has comments, really clarifies and makes immediate the issue at hand. So yes, it is true that the public can comment in advance if there's a well-written staff report, as there were tonight. So that can work. However, I think it's to the benefit of the council, as well as the person speaking, to have the comments more immediate, right when you're about to talk about it, so we have that fresh in our minds. I think this is best done in a well-structured format, and we're not talking about public hearings here, we're just talking about public comments during other agenda items. And that is that we have the staff report, the council asks questions, and then we have public comment. When the public comment period is over, there's no more public comment. And we've had that situation in the past when we were in person many, many times, when somebody who is speaking wants to get up and talk some more. And it's counterproductive to start letting them talk again. Even if they have something interesting or good to say, they really should have that time, and it should be limited right after the staff answers questions from the council. And then it comes back to the council for discussion and decision. Part of that can be asking staff some more questions, or staff can clarify anything they need to clarify. But that's the way I think it should go. And I would say that this is easier for those who are commenting to do it when the item is at hand. And it's actually easy for the council to remember everything because it's all focused on this particular item as opposed to at the beginning of the meeting where they've talked about a number of things. And unless you're keeping notes, and I do, but I don't know if everybody keeps notes, that's the only way I can remember the salient comments on each agenda item. So I like hearing from the public. I don't mind them making the meeting go longer. We had a discussion about whether that's really the case or not, but in general, I don't mind it at all. I've always liked hearing from the public at the podium or now in this virtual format. And that's all I have to say. If there's anybody else who feels the same way, that's fine. We can talk about it. Otherwise, we can have this pilot project for a little while and then see what happens after some number of weeks.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Right. Go ahead.
I think that our comment period is too restrictive, but I wouldn't go as far as John and let's say that they could make a comment after every subject that's brought up. I think what we should do is go back to what we did before and have a period in the beginning, allow people to speak at the public hearings, which you have to do, which is the right thing to do, and then to have a comment period at the very end, which we did before and which we eliminated. And this is what we used to have. And as far as when people, we talk about different subjects, it was always left to the discretion of the mayor whether he should allow someone to speak or not. I think we should continue that at the mayor's discretion. But the only thing I would change now is just at the very end, allow people to speak on anything they wish to speak about. That's my only comment.
Well, I hear everything that Councilmember Ebner is saying and Councilmember Bertone, and I appreciate that. I actually went back through the minutes all the way back to our incorporation date in 1960 and spent quite a bit of time reviewing those minutes, and turns out the city has had a rather checkered history of its oral comment period, whether it was at the end of the meeting, whether it was at the beginning of the meeting, and with public comments. So it actually has been kind of interesting in terms of the history of it. But to that end, I also think that I read a number of articles from other cities and the International City County Managers Association as well. This is a topic I do believe that cities are going to wrestle with right now, actually. If you look at a lot of the articles in the last 12 months, a lot of them are, in fact, struggling with the engagement piece and finding the right balance. And in fact, San Dimas is rather pioneering in the context of expanding public comment to the public to be available virtually, email, in person, writing. All of those things are things that this city in the past had not emphasized as much. And as a matter of fact, even the ability to Zoom is an enhancement. So to that end, I think we've made a lot of progress in where we're at. And even though it feels like we've scaled back some, I do think that we've actually expanded the opportunity for people to engage with the council. And so I don't think that I too like hearing from the public, and I think every member of the council here likes hearing from the public. They must, because they ended up being elected, so they obviously must be involved and in tune with the community. So I don't think hearing from the public necessarily is the issue at hand. But that's all I'm going to say about that at the moment.
Eric?
The only thing that I would add is that a lot of the feedback that I've been getting is from people that just don't make it to the agenda item that they have particular interest in, because these meetings do have a potential to run long. And I think, make no mistake, each meeting that we have, whether it's under this new format that we've tried now for a couple of meetings, or previous format of the way we've been doing it, for many years prior to that in person, meetings have the, ability to run long for a variety of reasons. But the particular concerns that were brought up were that, again, people weren't able to make it until the agenda item that they had interest in came up. And then also, I believe, as of right now, the initial comment period at the beginning, if someone had something to say on an agenda item towards the end of the agenda, they could bring it up at the beginning, and then that would be it. So essentially, the way, if we're going to revisit a comment period at the beginning and a comment period at the end, I don't know that it really addresses the concerns of those people that don't feel like waiting until the end of the meeting to make a comment on something that's not on the agenda. Or I'm sorry. I think I'm probably mixing up.
Right, they can do both at the beginning. And I, in fact, too, to your point, have actually heard people that were favorable of the idea that we expanded. You can comment on items on and off the agenda at the beginning, so it was in our heads when we heard the item.
That's what I'm kind of getting at, is the ability to comment on something on or off the agenda at the beginning. They can say their piece. I don't think anybody's really been at a time crunch so far. So I would kind of like to try out what we've got going. Tonight's meeting felt okay. The prior meeting felt okay to me. I would kind of like to try out what we've got going on a little bit.
All right. You know, my thinking about it is, one, I second John's motion to have this conversation, because I believe if a council person wants to have a conversation, we should have it. So I did second it. I agree with quite a bit of what John said, quite a bit of what Dennis said, but the reality is we only had one meeting. The last meeting we had, we didn't have any agenda. So we don't really know, you can't really use that as a barometer. And tonight's, if you all remember, we had 4 people call in on the phone, couple people, one person on Zoom, a couple of people came to the deal. So there is opportunity for people to speak. So at this point, I'm not really accustomed to making motions, but I'm going to make a motion that we continue with our current environment of how we're doing the meetings, and give it some period of time, and I'm not sure what that time would be, to figure out if this program is working or not working. But I just don't think we have enough data for any of the 5 of us to make a real educated decision if this is the right process. Last week we didn't have anybody come through those doors. Today we have the doors open. And we're conducting these meetings by the regulations that have been laid down to us by the county health department. So we are within the parameters of that. So I'm going to make a motion that we continue this process of how we're doing the meetings for an undetermined time, and I'll let the council decide if they want to put a time limit on it. But it'll be up to, I'm going to make that motion.
I'll second the mayor's motion. And I do think it's important to point out, too, that tonight we had a power outage in the city. And I know people were concerned about council opening the chambers. But in fact, people came, and in all actuality, there was some consideration on whether or not to cancel tonight's meeting. And in fact, one of the citizens that came here tonight did in fact experience the outage and still came to the chambers and addressed the council body. So I do think I agree with the mayor that we should evaluate the format. I think it has worked thus far. And I've heard from people before council meetings who have taken the time to engage and share their thoughts. And so I think I like the idea, and we'll evaluate it, and we can bring it back at a later time if so warranted.
Well, I don't agree with you all the way. I don't think that I want to go as far as John wants to go. The only reason I would vote against your motion is that I think at the very end, we should have another period where people can speak. But that's the only reason I'd vote against your motion.
And Dennis, and I'm not sure that I disagree that people should have an opportunity to speak, but I'd like to go along with the process and see where it's at, and then 2-3 months come back and revisit it and find out. I'm hearing as I'm out and about, I'm hearing this. That, hey, do we like this new process? And I'm asking, how can you like the new process that only lasted, we only did it 1 week? I think we have to do better at finding out what's working and not working. We had a meeting with no agenda last week, the first time we did it. We had a meeting now. So now there's some more conversation that come, and each week we can determine where it is. I'm totally surprised that we only had 4 people call, and then one on Zoom. But the information is out there how to get involved in this.
I do think it's interesting, though, that the school board doesn't allow public comment the way we do, and that's fascinating to me, especially recently in the way that they allow public comment. And, council here has heard a lot of criticism regarding public comment. But to that end, you and even John have been in this game a long time. So, legally we're meeting the requirements that we're supposed to. And I don't disagree with allowing the public to engage. But I do think that the council meeting is not a study session. And I think it's important that, we understand that. We, the council, who are elected, have to sit here and go through the public discourse and be able to get to a place, work together, and compromise at times to be able to do the business of the people. And, I hear from people, as I'm sure all of you do before these meetings, and the public needs to have the opportunity to weigh in for all the items on or off the agenda. But I just don't think that going through the exercise of a formal council meeting as a study session, has been, it's been helpful, and I would agree to that point, to John's point, having sat in the audience, that, it is helpful, absolutely, to address an item right at the moment, but it's also helpful, when in that context, to also let the body know before you get to the item. So, I support the mayor at this point, and see where we go.
Yeah, let me make a final comment about that. In a study session, we typically go back and forth a lot. The audience participates on and off, can do so anyway, if we're allowing them to, during the study session. And what I was talking about, of course, was not that at all. It was very structured from the item. But all that aside, I didn't make any comments about the ending of the meeting, because I completely agree that we should have that amount of time as well. So I would certainly go along with Dennis on that. One good example is the gentleman who called today, Pete Sluis. He talks about trains a lot, and he also makes comments that are supportive of the council, just appreciating what we're doing and all that. So he will often wait till the second period, or he has in the past anyway, because he's got more time to fit in the statistics or the subject matter that he wants to cover, and he realizes that 3 minutes just won't do it. So he'll either start at the first part and then wait until the end. And so for whatever reason, that longer time period at the end just gives people a little bit more elbow room to get their point across. And again, I'm not opposed to hearing that. But with that said, I'll accede to the council majority. I'll just vote no on the motion, but I'll look forward to evaluating it sometime down the road and see how it goes.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Would roll call, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Bertone?
No.
Councilmember Ebner,
No.
Councilmember Viana,
Yes.
Councilmember Weber,
Yes.
Mayor Bedar.
Yes.
Motion carries by 3-0 vote.
3-2 vote.
Correction, 3-2 vote.
I would just say that I hope the system that we're doing now works, and I would encourage people to read the agenda before the city council meeting. So if they have comments about things that we're going to discuss it at that time. And we will certainly, all 5 of us, listen enthusiastically. And they could do that, and that way they could comment about anything on the agenda. But you'd have to read the agenda before you tune in, and hopefully it works out.
I agree, Dennis, with you quite a bit, and with John. I just think we need to evaluate it a little longer, see where it's at. I'm not going to sit here and lie to anybody here. I'm not totally against a secondary time, but I want to just see where we're at, and I do understand. I understand. All right, we're going to move on to COVID-19 update.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the 18th of February, the LA County Public Health Department issued a health order update, and more specifically, the order acknowledged that we are falling below a criteria that allows elementary schools TK through 6 to be able to open for in-person instructions. However, on the grades 7 through 12, so long as we're still tier 1, we will not be able to open. In terms of access to the vaccine, you probably noticed that CVS is offering the vaccine, and that we're still waiting to hear a little bit more about the level of access that we can provide to our residents. But I mean, I have a feeling that now with Blue Shield being involved and Kaiser, we hopefully quickly will find a way that our residents can gain access to that, especially as we move to 1B and 2A tiers for the vaccine. I'll move straight into the goal line update, if I may, Mr. Mayor. We provided an update on social media and to the council that we were notified that there will be a full closure of Euclid Avenue at the railroad crossing from March 1st to August 31st. So we're looking at a 6-month period. It's a full 24/7 closure to pedestrians and vehicle traffic. 2nd Street to the north of the crossing and Bonita Avenue south of the crossing will remain open and accessible by way of detour routes around the affected area. Cataract Avenue north and south will serve as the main detour route. And for the residents that live in the area, we just want to acknowledge that there will be noise coming from construction equipment and that the bus stops may be temporarily relocated. So for those who access those bus stops, to keep an eye on Foothill Authority's changes notifications so that they can find a new location to jump on the bus. So with that, I will turn it back to the mayor for any questions.
Questions? Okay. City manager report?
I do not have a report this time.
Okay. City attorney?
No reports from me tonight either, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Councilman reports on meetings attended at the expense of local agency? Seeing none, City Council requests for future items, comments, or updates? John?
I have none today. Thank you.
Thank you, John. How's retirement?
Busy.
Yeah, I think that's about everybody's. Dennis?
Yeah.
Last Saturday, I had the opportunity to attend a celebration of life memorial for our ex-city manager, Bob Poff. And it's been about 25 years since Bob has been city manager. But he left a long legacy in the city. And after he retired, his interest in the city didn't stop. It continued. And we had, at the time, a successful Festival of Arts and he was the moving force behind it, and so Bob will be missed, and I'm sure we all realize that. The other thing is we discussed before the SB 9, the Atkins bill, and basically what it does is that it gets rid of single-family residential neighborhoods. And you can take a lot and divide it in some circumstances is up until 4, have 4 houses where you ordinarily have 1. And the council has taken a stand against that, as we said before. And the last thing is that we have 3 beautiful murals in our city hall, and they're being refurbished by Margie Green. And I would advise you to take a look at the 2 on the right, which have been done pretty well. The one on the left hasn't, I don't think she started on that one yet. But if you, for the audience, if you have the opportunity to come in City Hall, take a look at the murals we have in there, and they're really quite lovely. And thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's it.
Thank you. Ryan? Ryan, yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to echo Council Member Bertone's comments about Bob Poff. I had the opportunity to meet him when after I got elected and learn about the Festival of Arts and all of his contributions to the city, not just during his time as a city manager, but his community engagement is remarkable. And I learned a lot from him also about just a lot of the ways that the city has worked together with community organizations to do some really fantastic things. So it's definitely someone to be missed. I want to thank Margie as well for her efforts on these paintings. I know when that came about, some of these things needed a little bit of love, so thank you so much. And for those in the community that don't know Mrs. Margie Green, she is a very talented artist, as well as one of our planning commissioners and a very involved individual in the community. So thank you, Margie, so much for what you're doing and giving back here, as well as the Historical Society, who I believe is also supporting that. And the last thing is, I know we didn't get a chance to see, or I haven't heard yet, what happened at the City of West Covina today. But I know some people in the community, just having read some of the feedback that some people send regarding the city's monitoring or even thought of considering the establishment of a local health department being outlandish or there's no need. You know, I would offer to the community to take a look at the governor's comments today as it relates to the city of Long Beach, who's being praised for having their own public health department, for their outstanding rollout of the vaccines, testing, and being able to open schools back up. And I really think that, you know, when I went back and I looked through San Dimas's history, reading all of the agendas and minutes going back to 1960 and moving forward through the different eras, you know, someone had an idea of what a city could be. And many people, long before the people that are serving now, worked hard to put this city. It was an idea, not too different from how the rec center was at one time in history, or how downtown is now or could be in the future. So I wouldn't let an idea you know, get torpedoed because the city wouldn't even be here if someone didn't believe in an idea, nor would a sheriff's station if there wasn't an idea. So bottom line is I want to give a shout out to the city of Long Beach and Mayor Garcia for all his efforts, and I really look forward to learning a little bit about West Covina, what they've elected to do, and hearing back from staff eventually on the progress that's being made there, and you know what potentially could be done here. But with that being said, I hope everybody had a blessed Valentine's Day. I don't think we had seen you since then, so I hope everybody was able to make the best they could. And hopefully, one last thing as it relates to COVID-19. There is a lot of apathy in the community as it relates to getting tested. And, you know, I would just encourage you that if you think you've been exposed to someone that has COVID-19, and exposure being defined as you were within 6 feet of someone for greater than 15 minutes, you absolutely should go get tested. A lot of people, just in my dealings with folks, feel, hey, I feel fine. There's no reason for me to get tested or what have you. But whether or not you're an asymptomatic or carrier or not could be yet to be determined. So if you think you were exposed or you develop symptoms, don't even question it. Just go get tested. There's plenty of capacity throughout the county, and hopefully you'll be fine. With that, just have a great week. Thank you.
Eric?
I've got nothing tonight.
And I have nothing tonight. We're going to go into a closed session, a successor agency and city council closed session conference with real property negotiators. With that, I'd entertain a motion for closure.
So moved.
Don't think we need a vote on that.
And I will recuse myself from that closed session.
No, John, we're going to miss you.
I'll see you next meeting.
Sure we will.
Or maybe before.
Okay. Take care. All right, we're going to stay in this room, or stay in this room. Okay.
We take 5 minutes perhaps for the...
Yeah, 5 to 8 minutes.
Thank you.
Mayor and City Council, the council met in closed session tonight to discuss the one item on the closed session agenda, real property negotiations item. Council received a report and gave direction to staff, but no reportable action was taken on that item. And with that, tonight's meeting is adjourned.